Before we start, I'd like to give a massive shout out to the following people for supporting Stories Telling Stories on Patreon: Jim Ross, Holly, Tamara, Tom, and Maddy. Thank you so much for your support. If you'd like to help support the show and hear your name listed before future episodes, head on over to patreon.com/storiestellingstories. After attending a New York University seminar held in a downtown location, Ruth Davis walked back to her office unaware that she was being followed by a man. As she approached the front door of the office building, he suddenly appeared at her side as he opened the door for her. "Thank you," she said with a smile. He did not respond. Instead, he focused his eyes on the front of her dress. She realized that he was reading her name tag, which she had forgotten to remove when the seminar ended. The man disappeared as quickly as he had appeared. The next morning, Saturday, Ruth left her apartment for her weekly grocery shopping. She noticed the strange man sitting on a bench on the edge of a park located across the street from her apartment. The sight of this man made her feel uneasy. At the grocery store, she left her shopping cart at the end of an aisle that was crowded with carts. Ruth went down the aisle to pick up one item, and she returned to her cart. When she looked in the cart, she saw a frozen fish with its head in place and with its large eyes appearing to be looking up at Ruth. She jumped back in surprise and felt self-conscious. Had others seen her jump? She looked around and saw several aisles away the man watching her. Ruth began to push the cart in his direction, intending to confront him, but he had already retreated rapidly through the outer door of the store. Ruth had started to work just last month at a financial services firm in New York City. Her hometown was far away, and she had no relatives or friends in this new location. Ruth spoke to her apartment manager about the stalker. The manager said, "I can help you, because I have a close friend who's a police lieutenant in this district. I'll ask him to come talk with you." Saturday evening, Lieutenant Tom Holmes, a middle-aged officer, came to see Ruth. He listened to her story and said, "I want you to telephone me if you see this man again. He's not committed a crime for which I can arrest him, but I can get him to identify himself and can order him to stop annoying you." Sunday morning was such a lovely morning that Ruth decided to walk to church, which was only 3 blocks from her apartment. As she prepared to cross the intersection, she paused to allow an approaching automobile to turn the corner in front of her. The car stopped and blocked her path. The stalker jumped out and grabbed Ruth, dragging her towards the open door of his car. "Help! Help me!" Ruth screamed. She realized that she was in the hands of a man who was much stronger than she was. 3 pedestrians, 2 men and a woman, were a half block away. "Leave that girl alone!" the woman shouted. The men ran towards the attacker, but they got there too late. He shoved Ruth to the sidewalk, jumped into his car, and sped away. The 3 witnesses were assured by Ruth that she had not suffered any injury, and that she would report the attack to the police as soon as she returned to her apartment. None of them, including Ruth, had been alert enough to get the license number or a good description of the car. One man wrote down his name and address and had the others do the same. "The police will want to know if anyone witnessed the attack on you." Upon returning to her apartment, Ruth telephoned Lieutenant Holmes, who came immediately. "This man has committed a crime," he said. "Now I can arrest him. You're in a dangerous situation. For the next 3 mornings I will escort you to work. Perhaps, if this fellow's watching, he'll see that you have police protection, and he'll stop following you." "The first thing I've been doing each morning is go for a jog in the park across the street," Ruth said. Lieutenant Holmes interrupted her. "Do not think about jogging tomorrow or any other day as long as you're in danger from this stalker." All went well on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday when Holmes drove Ruth to the office. On Thursday, Ruth got up early and decided to go for a jog in the park. "Lieutenant Holmes will never know about this," she said to herself. Ruth had been running for only 2 or 3 minutes when she perceived that she was alone in the park. It was a cloudy and chilly day, so the usual people who came to the park in the morning had stayed home. Ruth started to return to the safety of her apartment when she saw him emerging from a wooded area and running towards her. He was between Ruth and her apartment. Ruth began running at top speed to get away, but she could see that he was gaining steadily. She knew he was far stronger than she was. She realized she was also much slower. Her only chance was in being more agile than he was. She stopped running. As he approached her at top speed, he lifted his right arm, prepared to strike a blow. Ruth saw some kind of weapon in his hand, which he swung towards her head. She dodged the blow, causing him to lose his balance. Ruth aimed a kick at his head with all her strength. Her foot struck him in the middle of the face. He fell to his knees, using his two arms like poles to prevent his upper arm from collapsing to the ground. Blood began gushing from his nose. While Ruth ran towards her apartment, she looked back to see him still trying to recover from her kick. Thank goodness, Ruth thought, for that women's self-defense course that she took last year. Several police cars came in response to Ruth's 911 telephone call. After she described the attack and the attacker, one police officer stayed with her to complete an official report while other officers went to search the area. Lieutenant Holmes arrived about 10 minutes later. He was upset with Ruth. "Young lady, didn't I tell you not to jog?" he said to her. "Why did you ignore my warning? Come with me. Show me exactly where this attack occurred." At the scene, Holmes bent over for a close look over the ground. He looked at, but did not touch the weapon that the stalker had dropped. He observed the pool of blood on the ground, and he turned to look at Ruth to assure himself that this was not her blood. Two other officers nearby were instructed by the lieutenant to call in the evidence collection team. Back at Ruth's apartment, Holmes spoke bluntly. "You had a narrow escape today. The weapon that man used was a long metal bar with extremely sharp edges. You would have been killed or would have suffered brain damage if this weapon had split open your skull. Your kick may make this man more determined than ever to hurt you. We're going to protect you." The lieutenant continued to speak. "Tomorrow morning, a police officer will escort you to work. I've secured permission to lend you a new police radio that will enable you to summon help much faster than use by telephone. You press this large button and talk into the unit as if you had dialed 911 on the phone. As soon as you press the large button, a police dispatcher will be listening to the words you speak." He handed the police radio to Ruth, who put it into her purse. On Friday morning, Ruth was ready when the police officer rang her doorbell. She opened the door wide and said, "I just need to go back to the bedroom for my purse. I'll be with you." The police officer stood in the open doorway. Ruth picked up her purse and looked down the hallway from the bedroom in time to see the stalker striking the police officer over the head. Ruth withdrew the police radio from her purse, pressed the large button, and began shouting, "Emergency! Emergency! Police officer needs help!" She repeated her address twice. The stalker heard her shouting into the radio. He started to move toward her. She slammed and locked the bedroom door. The bathroom entry was through her bedroom. She slammed and locked the bathroom door. Ruth opened the bathroom window and climbed out of the windowsill. She could hear the noise of the stalker breaking down her bedroom door as she jumped onto the soft flower garden beneath her first-floor window. While she ran towards the front of the apartment building, Ruth looked back and saw the stalker leaning out of the bathroom window. Less than a minute after her call for help, sirens from police vehicles could be heard. Ruth was astonished by the number of police officers who came. The first officers to arrive followed Ruth's directions and rushed into her apartment. They found their fellow officer unconscious and bleeding. The stalker had left the building by a back door. With several officers at her side, Ruth looked down the street and pointed to a mailman getting into a mail truck. "That's the stalker!" she exclaimed. Officers ran towards the mail truck, but could not get to it before the stalker sped away. One officer went into the building from which the mailman had emerged. "The real mailman is injured and needs an ambulance!" he shouted. "His uniform was stolen!" Police had alerted all cars about the stalker in the mail vehicle, and within a few minutes, the stalker was in custody. "Your alertness in identifying the stalker in the mailman's uniform prevented him from escaping," an officer said to Ruth. A group of officers headed by Lieutenant Holmes brought the captured man to Ruth for her identification. "Yes, this is the man who tried to kill me," she said. Lieutenant Holmes observed a look of hatred directed towards Ruth. At the preliminary hearing in court and at the trial many months later, Holmes was disturbed to see the same look of bitter hatred directed at Ruth. At police headquarters, officers found the story of the stalker's life to be a familiar one. There was no father in the home in which he was reared. His mother was an uncaring person. The stalker had a long record of arrests as a juvenile delinquent and as an adult criminal. "Why did you want to hurt this particular young woman?" Lieutenant Holmes asked him. The reply was that his probation officer had suggested that he read his horoscope every day. The horoscope on the first day that he saw Ruth had stated, "An attractive person you will see today will not become a close friend." In his confused way of thinking, he interpreted the horoscope to mean that this person would be his enemy. The attractive person he saw was Ruth. Ruth's parents had spent the week of the stalker's trial in New York with their daughter. After the stalker was found guilty by the jury, Lieutenant Holmes spoke privately with her father. "I've prepared an envelope containing all the information I've been able to gather about the stalker. Take this envelope home with you and put it in your safe deposit box. This man will serve a long sentence in prison because he nearly killed a police officer who was assigned to protect Ruth. The stalker now directs his hatred at Ruth more than any other person. I believe that when he gets out of prison, he'll try to find your daughter. If the stalker comes near her again, show this information to the local police. They'll immediately understand the importance of protecting your daughter." At the airport, on the day that Ruth's parents were leaving for their hometown, Ruth said to them, "I never have to worry about the stalker." "Yes," her mother replied. "Everything is safe now." Ruth's father felt in his coat pocket to be certain that he had in his possession the packet of information presented by Lieutenant Holmes. The end. There is an epidemic affecting content creators that seems to be coming to a head. This issue is not a modern one, but our increasingly interconnected world has seen it increase to millions more than ever before, spanning every platform and across every conceivable medium. You may not have experienced it yourself, but I guarantee you know someone who has. It can start harmless enough, with an unsolicited DM, a quick compliment, a baited hook. And it can quickly dissolve into anger, hurling slander, doxing, death threats, additional messages and attempts at contact across multiple platforms, showing up at a place of employment, showing up at home, knocking on the front door for hours, sleeping in the back garden, peeking through windows, leaving notes and gifts interspersed with professed gestures of love and explicit details about how they will take your life, your family members' lives, kill your pets, and that there is nothing you can do to stop it. And statistically, they're right. 99% of online stalking cases that are taken to trial end in the defendant walking free without being charged. They may be issued a restraining order, which they've received in the past and simply walk through. They will continue, and they will either force the creator off the web and into a life of solitude and PTSD, forever looking over their shoulder, even littered with the occasional note, "I'm still coming for you." Or, like so many, force them to continue creating in order to support themselves, knowing their stalker is out there, watching, and waiting. If this sounds like a gross over-exaggeration, then you haven't been paying attention. In the last week, I have had several of the content creators I follow come forward, either publicly or behind community walls, with their own stories of stalking. From persistent and vulgar messaging to attempts at doxing, death threats, attempted assault, abduction, and more. This is a problem that predominantly affects female creators, but I know a few men who have also been victims of these tactics. Most are still creating, but a few have been forced away. The natural reaction is, unfortunately, to blame the victim. Learn karate, buy a gun, get a dog, move house, get a different job. And beyond the ridiculousness of those other suggestions, when is the last time you were being stalked at work by someone who was threatening your life and the only solution you were offered was to get a new job? A lot of the creators I'm talking about, streamers, YouTubers, musicians, etc., do this for work. This is their job. They're self-employed content creators making their living online, which these days is absolutely vital. When your work is creating content online, you can't just walk down the street and get a new job. I'm refusing to name names and I'm leaving information intentionally vague for privacy reasons, but some of the things I've been told are disturbing at best and horrifying at its worst. One name I will mention, because of the campaign she started, is Sweet Anita. For the unaware, Anita is a Twitch streamer who has been publicly dealing with a stalker that has committed nearly all of the above-mentioned infractions against her, including making death threats towards her publicly in her livestream chat, and being picked up and questioned by police a block and a half from her house with the knife in his pocket that he told her he was going to kill her with, and who was released from their custody, then and there, a block and a half from her house, without charge. She has detailed the account of her struggle against this stalker in a video on her YouTube channel, and I highly encourage you to check it out, as it also includes stories from other creators who shared their own stories of stalking and abuse from within their own communities. A defining takeaway from all of their stories is the shockingly impartial response from police and even the FBI in dealing with these cases. They're met with apathy and indifference from those who are sworn to protect them. They don't uphold restraining orders, and they don't take these threats against their lives seriously, and even in the rare instance they are arrested and charged, only 1% go to jail for their actions or face any sort of significant repercussions. People will continue to stalk and harass and threaten and kill content creators at will because there are no repercussions. Because until they sink in that blade or pull that trigger or swing that bat at the back of their head, then nobody in law enforcement cares. Bianca Delvin was only 17 when she was brutally murdered by an individual who turned around and posted pictures of her decapitated head and dismembered body online for the world to see. Are you paying attention yet? Now, perhaps this is a matter of mental health. But when it affects so many people, it becomes a matter of public health. But what can I do? I care. I'm a good person. Easy. The next time you write a comment or send a DM, stop and think for a second. You have a choice. You can perpetuate this culture that's leading to unspeakable acts of harassment and abuse, or you cannot. To paraphrase a fellow creator, 99% of the comments I get are grand. They're lovely things from nice people, and that's fine. But it's that 1% that forced me to adopt a policy to never answer my DMs. If what you're trying to say in a DM you would be ashamed for your mother to read, or if you wouldn't dare say it in a public comment section, then don't say it. Don't send it. You can appreciate the content and take great pleasure in what they create, but a creator doesn't owe you anything. Let me say that again. A content creator doesn't owe you anything. So if it pains you to not say anything, then say something nice in the comment section and leave it at that. A simple, "Hey, I love your content. Here's a picture of my dog," can make a creator's day, but leave it at that. They're not your friends. They will not date you. They won't be your tour guide when you come to their town. They're people, just like you, just like me, trying to make a living and live their life. So let's work together. Call out hate and abuse when you see it. Demand our platforms, like YouTube and Twitch for example, adopt stricter stalking and abuse policies. Advocate for verified accounts so law enforcement can better track down individuals who make threats against other people. And hold your local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies responsible for protecting the people they've sworn to protect. Just because someone makes their living producing YouTube videos or streaming on Twitch does not mean they don't deserve our protection, our support, and our respect. Join the movement at #StopStalking, and let's bring this sort of behavior to an end. The 99% of us lovely humans far outweigh the 1% toxic minority. Their aggression will not stand. Not anymore. And just in case you think this is a new sort of behavior that's driven by the digital age, here's a second example of similar levels of senseless aggression in the form of a short story by influential American novelist Jack London from the turn of the 20th century. As our introductory story, The Stalker by Lawrence E. Rogers told a more contemporary tale of a man stalking a woman and nearly taking her life before ending up convicted and sent to prison, An unfortunate best-case circumstance, Moonface tells the story of a man with an abject hatred towards his neighbor, driven by nothing but ending piece by piece as he single-handedly dismantles and destroys the man's life before seeing to it that he meets a brutal end, as well as his dog. This is Moonface by Jack London. John Claverhouse was a moon-faced man. You know the kind. Cheekbones wide apart, chin and forehead melting into the cheeks to complete the perfect round, and the nose, broad and pudgy, equidistant from the circumference, flattened against the very center of the face like a dough ball upon the ceiling. Perhaps that's why I hated him, for truly he had become an offense to my eyes, and I believed the earth to be cumbered with his presence. Perhaps my mother may have been superstitious of the moon and looked upon it over the wrong shoulder at the wrong time, but be that as it may, I hated John Claverhouse. Not that he had done me what society would consider a wrong or an ill turn, far from it. The evil was of a deeper, subtler sort, so elusive, so intangible as to defy clear, definite analysis in words. We all experience such things at some period in our lives. For the first time, we see a certain individual, one who the very instant before we did not dream existed, and yet, at the first moment of meeting, we say, I do not like that man. Why do we not like him? We don't know why. We know only that we don't. We have taken a dislike, that is all. And so I, with John Claverhouse. What right had such a man to be happy? Yet he was an optimist. He was always gleeful and laughing. All things that were always all right, curse him! How it grated on my soul that he should be so happy. Other men could laugh, and it did not bother me. I even used to laugh myself before I met John Claverhouse, but his laugh, it irritated me, maddened me, as nothing else under the sun could irritate or madden me. It haunted me, gripped hold of me, and would not let me go. It was a huge, gargantuan laugh. Waking or sleeping, it was always with me, whirring and jarring across my heartstrings like an enormous rasp. At break of day, it came whooping across the fields to spoil my pleasant morning reverie. Under the aching noonday glare, when green things drooped and the birds withdrew to the depths of the forest and all nature drowsed, his great ha-ha and ho-ho rose up to the sky and challenged the sun. And at black midnight, from the lonely crossroads where he turned from town into his own place, came his plaguely cachinnations to rouse me from my sleep and make me writhe and clench my nails into my palms. I went forth privately into the night-time, and turned his cattle into his fields, and in the morning heard his whooping laugh as he drove them out again. "It is nothing," he says. "The poor dumb beasties are not to be blamed for straying into fatter pastures." He had a dog named Mars, a big, splendid brute, part deerhound, part bloodhound, and resembling both. Mars was a great delight to him, and they were always together. But I bided my time, and one day, when opportunity was ripe, lured the animal away and settled for him with strychnine and beefsteak. It made positively no impression on John Claverhouse. His laugh was as hearty and frequent as ever, and his face as much like the full moon as it always had been. Then I set fire to his haystacks and his barn. But the next morning, being Sunday, he went forth blithe and cheerful. "Where are you going?" I asked him as he went by the crossroads. "Trout," he said, and his face beamed like a full moon. "I just dote on trout." "Was there ever such an impossible man?" His whole harvest had gone up in his haystacks and barn. It was uninsured, I knew, and yet, in the face of famine and the rigorous winter, he went out gaily in the quest of a mess of trout, because he doted on them. Had gloom but rested, no matter how lightly on his brow, or had his bovine countenance grown long and serious and less like the moon, or he had removed that smile from once off his face, I am sure I could have forgiven him for existing, but no. He grew only more cheerful under misfortune. I insulted him. He looked back at me with a slow and smiling surprise. I fight you? Why? He asked slowly. And then he laughed. You are so funny. You'll be the death of me. What would you do? It was past endurance. By the blood of Judas, how I hated him. There was that name, Claverhouse. What a name. Wasn't it absurd? Claverhouse, merciful heaven, why Claverhouse? Again and again I asked myself that question. I should not have minded Smith or Brown or Jones, but Claverhouse? I leave it to you. Repeat it to yourself. Claverhouse. Just listen to the ridiculous sound of it. Claverhouse. Should a man live with such a name, I ask you? No, you would say, and no, said I. But I bethought me of his mortgage. What if his crops and barn destroyed? I knew he'd be unable to meet it. So, I got a shrewd, close-mouthed, tight-fisted moneylender to get the mortgage transferred to him. I did not appear, but through this agent, I forced the foreclosure. In but a few days, no more, believe me, than the law allowed, were given John Claverhouse to remove his goods and chattels from the premises. Then I strolled down to see how he took it, for he had lived there upward of 20 years. But he met me with his saucer eyes twinkling, and the light glowing and spreading in his face, till it was as a full rising moon. Ha 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 ha! He laughed. The funniest tyke, that youngster of mine. Did you ever hear the like? Let me tell you. He was down playing by the edge of the river when a piece of the bank caved in and splashed him. Oh, Papa, he cried. A great big puddle flew up and hit me. He stopped and waited for me to join him in his infernal glee. I don't see any laugh in it, I said shortly, and I know my face went sour. He regarded me with wonderment, and then came the damnable light, glowing and spreading as I've described it, till his face shone soft and warm like the summer moon, and then the laugh. Oh, that's funny. You don't see it, huh? Oh, he doesn't see it. Oh, why, look here. You know a puddle, but I turned on my right and left him. That was the last. I could no longer stand it. The thing must end right there, I thought. Curse him. The earth should be quit of him. And as I went over the hill, I could hear his monstrous laugh reverberating against the sky. Now, I pride myself on doing things neatly. And when I resolved to kill John Claverhouse, I had it in mind to do so in such fashion that I should not look back upon it and feel ashamed. I hate bungling and I hate brutality. To me, there's something repugnant in merely striking a man with one's naked fist. It's sickening. So, to shoot or stab or club John Claverhouse, oh, that name, did not appeal to me. And only not was I impelled to do so, to do it neatly and artistically, but also in such a manner that not the slightest possible suspicion could be directed against me. To this end, I bent my intellect, and after a week of profound incubation, I hatched the scheme. Then I set to work. I bought a water spaniel bitch, 5 months old, and devoted my whole attention to her training. Had anyone spied upon me, they would have remarked that this training consisted entirely of one thing: retrieving. I taught the dog, which I called Bologna,
to fetch sticks I threw into the water, and not only to fetch, but to fetch at once, without mouthing or playing with them. The point was that she was to stop for nothing, but to deliver the stick in all haste. I made a practice of running away and leaving her to chase me, with the stick in her mouth, till she caught me. She was a bright animal, and took to the game with such eagerness that I was soon content. After that, at the first casual opportunity, I presented Bologna to John Claverhouse. I knew what I was about, for I was aware of a little weakness of his, and of a little private sinning for which he was regularly and inveterably guilty.
"No,"
he said, when I placed the end of the rope in his hand.
"No, you don't mean it."
And his mouth opened wide and he grinned all over his damnable moon face.
I kind of thought, somehow, you didn't like me,"
he exclaimed.
"Wasn't it funny for me to make such a mistake?"
At the thought, he held his sides with laughter.
"What is her name?"
he managed to ask. "Bologna," I said. He tittered.
"What a funny name."
I gritted my teeth, for his mirth put them on edge, and snapped out between them. She was the wife of Mars, you know. Then the light of the full moon began to suffice his face until he exploded with,
"That was my other dog. Well, I guess she's a widow now." Oh,
he whooped after me, and I turned and fled swiftly over the hill. The week passed by, and on Saturday evening I said to him, "You go away Monday, don't you?" He nodded his head and grinned. "Then you won't have another chance to get a mess of those trout you just dote on." But he did not notice the sneer.
"Oh, I don't know."
He chuckled.
"I'm going up tomorrow to try pretty hard."
Thus was assurance made doubtly sure, and I went back to my house hugging myself with rapture. Early next morning I saw him go by with a dip net and gunny sack, and Bologna trotting at his heels. I knew where he was bound, and cut by the back pasture and climbed through the underbrush to the top of the mountain, keeping carefully out of sight. I followed the crest along for a couple miles to a natural amphitheater in the hills, where the little river raced down out of a gorge and stopped for a breath in a large and placid rock-bound pool. That was the spot. I sat down on the crow of the mountain, where I could see all that occurred, and lighted my pipe. Ere many minutes had passed, John Claverhouse came plodding up the bed of the stream. Bologna was ambling about with him, and they were in high feather, her short, snappy barks mingling with his deep-chested notes. Arrived at the pool, he threw down the dip net and sack, and drew from his hip pocket what looked like a large fat candle, but I knew it to be a stick of giant, for such was his method of catching trout. He dynamited them. He attached the fuse by wrapping the giant tightly in a piece of cotton. Then he ignited the fuse and tossed the whole explosive into the pool. Like a flash, Bologna was in the pool after it. I could have shrieked aloud for joy. Claverhouse yelled at her, but without avail. He pelted her with clods and rocks, but she swam steadily on till she got the stick of giant in her mouth, when she twirled about and headed for shore. Then, for the first time, he realized his danger and started to run. As foreseen and planned by me, she made the bank and took out after him. I tell you, it was great! As I've said, the pool lay in a sort of amphitheater, above and below. The stream could be crossed on stepping stones, and around, up and down across the stones raced Claverhouse and Bologna. I could not have believed that such an ungainly man could run so fast. But run he did, Bologna hot-footed after him and gaining. Then, just as she caught up, he in full stride, and she leaping with nose at his knee, there was a sudden flash. A burst of smoke, a terrific detonation, and where man and dog had been instant before, there was not to be seen but a big hole in the ground. Death from accident while engaged in illegal fishing. That was the verdict of the coroner's jury. And that's why I pride myself on the neat and artistic way in which I finished off John Claverhouse. There was no bungling, no brutality, Nothing of which to be ashamed in the whole transaction, as I'm sure you will agree. No more does his infernal laugh go echoing among the hills, and no more does his fat moon face rise up to vex me. My days are peaceful now, and my nights sleep deep. The end.
Locked in a Vacancy is produced in collaboration with Stories Telling Stories and STS Media Group, socially isolating itself at Milt House Studios in Milton, Vermont, casting around the globe to your frontal lobe wherever podcasts are found. Locked in a Vacancy is also streaming on YouTube at Stories Telling Stories. Make sure to give us a review wherever you stream our show. We really appreciate it. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Give us a subscribe on YouTube, and consider supporting us on Patreon for as little as $1 a month. And until next time, stay sane, stay safe, and stay whimsical.